Samurai Shodown.
I have to admit that I was quite surprised when I found out that Samurai Shodown VI was getting released in September of 2005. Well, in Japanese arcades, that is. Because in April 2004, the last officially licensed game on the Neo Geo MVS was released with Samurai Shodown V Special. So basically a year and a half to right all the wrongs that 5 had made? That pretty much seemed impossible to me. Okay, I guess I need to, give you full disclosure here. 5 Special fixed many of the problems that I had with 5, but still, we're talking about an entirely different arcade hardware here. Could SNK Playmore possibly deliver? Well, the short answer is, for the most part, yeah. I absolutely have a few problems with Samurai Shodown 6, don't get me wrong, but I'll leave those comments for after we dig into what makes the game good. For starters, the roster. One cannot talk about Samurai Shodown 6 without talking about the incredibly impressive roster. We're talking over 40 playable characters here, the return of some legendary characters that haven't appeared in a Samurai Shodown game since Samurai Shodown 2, and more. So here's the breakdown. All 28 characters from Samurai Shodown 5 Special are present, 2 sub-bosses from Samurai Shodown 5, the 7 core characters from Samurai Shodown 1 and 2 that didn't make the cut for later games, and finally 4 brand new characters. That's one hell of an impressive all-star lineup of characters. The biggest gameplay change made to the series with Samurai Shodown 6 is the introduction of spirit selections. This works sort of like the groove selection from Capcom vs SNK 2. In total, there are 6 spirits you can choose from: Rei, Shin, Do, Ten, Zen, and Ken. They change everything from the way you use specials to the way the rage meter fills and much more. I'm not going to go into each and every ability the spirits give you, but needless to say they allow you to use the gameplay you preferred from previous Samurai Shodown games. In other words, if you enjoyed 5's system or preferred 4's, you can go ahead and select a spirit that closely matches the gameplay from those earlier games. Somehow SNK managed to keep the gameplay fairly balanced too, which really surprised me because of all the different options available, and it would have been really easy for things to get completely out of control, but they don't for the most part. The backgrounds are high res and look absolutely awesome. They incorporate 2D and 3D elements perfectly, but the sprites are recycled from earlier Neo Geo days, albeit they've been cleaned up somewhat. Some of the stages look downright awesome, but it's still a shame the characters couldn't have received the same overhaul. I should mention that the violence has been completely removed from the game, with no blood anywhere in sight, no fatalities, no gore, nada, which will surely annoy longtime fans, and it's one of the big things I dislike about the game too. Personally, I also didn't like how they left feudal Japan, as there's stages showing the White House and African Savannah and other locations like that. Now I know the original game was a globe-trotting adventure, but some of the stages just feel out of place. I mentioned at the beginning of the review that there were some areas that annoyed me with this game, and those were pretty much the biggest complaints I have. I also didn't really like the music as much, as it didn't feel like traditional Japanese tunes. It felt more orchestrated and symphonic in nature, which again is supposed to highlight the fact that the game takes place in different locations. The sound effects and voice samples are top-notch though, and they feel like they belong. I suppose I'll mention it in this game, but it applies to all of the SNK fighters released on the Atomiswave. I think the reason why I was so impressed with the backgrounds but never adored the in-game character sprites is because of Guilty Gear Izuka and Guilty Gear X version 1.5, both of which were released in 2003 on the Atomiswave and feature high-res character sprites and backgrounds. Now don't get me wrong, I like the 2D sprites over 3D backgrounds, but the character sprites being recycled and only slightly cleaned up never sat well with me when another franchise on the same arcade hardware looks so much better. One common complaint I hear about the Atomiswave is that it was the arcade hardware with loading, but I never found that to be a problem. In fact, I never even noticed that the system had loading, except for the initial boot, when you put the game into the system. And yeah, okay, there may be, a second or two between fights, but really, I never noticed that it was really that bad. Samurai Shodown was once one of the best weapon-based fighters on the market. It was the pioneer for the subgenre and the first SNK franchise that I really fell in love with back in the day, because it felt just so much different than Street Fighter II. It was a defensive game where you really only struck your opponent when the time was right, but as the series went on, the gameplay changed more and more. This one, while certainly more enjoyable than 5, at least in my opinion, still feels more like a fast-paced combo-driven experience than the slow, methodical, defensive gameplay of the earlier games. Samurai Shodown Sen was the last new installment in the Samurai Shodown series, excluding the Anthology collection, and Sen was released in 2008 in Japan, making this pretty much a retired series. That really saddens me, as there's still a market for these kind of games. You hear me, SNK Playmore? Give us Samurai Shodown 7, damn it! For those interested in checking out Samurai Shodown 6, I would highly recommend picking up the Samurai Shodown Anthology on the Wii, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation Portable. Just be warned that the Anthology doesn't include Samurai Shodown V Special, which improved on the original release in many ways. As for this game, Samurai Shodown 6 is certainly worth checking out, even if it is a bit different than the original games.